Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so grateful you are here. On today's solo episode, we're talking about one of my favorite themes. This is a really powerful mindfulness practice, especially what in Buddhism they call a heart practice. And for me, when I learned this years and years and years ago, it changed my life. And it's a teaching that has come up on the podcast before, but this teaching is something that I bring into my coaching sessions with my one-on-one clients when it's appropriate, when the themes start to come up, and it supports them setting themselves free from these constraints and this suffering that our minds love to create as humans. And, in Buddhism, they really talk about life is suffering. And so, how do we gain some tools? How do we gain some inner resources? How do we create more capacity so that we can be with the suffering in a kinder way? And so that the suffering doesn't swallow us and eat us whole, but instead we learn to flow with it. We learn to embrace it. We learn to accept it and move with it in life. So many of our struggles, internal and external, come because we want to resist. We want to control and or we want to numb out and ignore. But there's so much power when we bring awareness to the areas of our life that are suffering, where there's pain, where there's a rub, tension, because then we can learn to work with it. And when we work with it, it's not necessarily the intention to get rid of it, but it's to allow ourselves to meet it with some more ease. Don't we all want that? Aren't we tired of feeling like we're fighting and pushing and pulling for life? Don't you want more flow and ease and receptivity and generosity and love? And I really think these are things we all want. It's just that it gets really clouded and congested by our ego minds and our self-preservation and our need to control and security and safety and all the fun things that come up that can block us from really being this wiser, loving, kinder, heart-based self that I think all humans are capable of being. So today we're going to talk about this topic of equanimity, and I'm going to talk about what it is, how to embody it, some mindsets to practice around it, and the hope, the intention is that you can use this practice of equanimity to navigate change, to support you stepping into this new year and navigating change and being able to maintain the sense of equanimity amid the change. We're stepping into a new presidency. There's a lot of kind of, what change is coming? There's stepping into a new year. What change is coming, right? Change is always constant. And so how can we use this practice of equanimity to support us in navigating this change with more ease? So let's settle in and let's get centered. So what is equanimity? If you asked me 10 years ago, I had never heard this word before. And now it is one of my favorite words. Equanimity is defined as a state of mental calmness. There's this embodied sense of composure, this evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. And when I think about equanimity, I really visualize this mountain, the sense of rootedness, groundedness. If you've ever listened to my mountain meditation, it's also on the podcast, as well as on centeredinthecity.com. If you ever listened to that guided practice influence from Jon Kabat-Zinn's teachings, it is all about embodying this image of a mountain where we're rooted and yet we're tall and present. and the weather of life swirls around the mountain, right? The rain, the wind, the snow, the sun. And yet the mountain doesn't move or react. It just is there. It's just there witnessing the weather, allowing it to fall on it. And when some people hear this definition of equanimity, it's like, well, why would I want that? Why do I want to just like accept what's here and like let rain be thrown in my face or, let the snow fall on me? And there can be this kind of inner dialogue of like, why are you just standing there letting the snow fall on you? Are you being indifferent? Are you being passive? But there's a difference. There's an energetic difference of being passive and kind of shut down in the present moment, like numbed out, like you're there, but you're not there, right? Like your body might be there, but your attention or your nervous system is completely shut down. And equanimity is not that. Equanimity is the opposite. It's where we are able to be rooted, present in the here and the now, listening, holding space, eyes wide open, senses engaged. Yet we're not getting swept away in the mind by all of the stories, by the thinking traps, by the what ifs, by the catastrophizing, by the fear, by some intense emotions, by anger, by grief. We can just allow it to be there, witness it like weather patterns moving in the sky. I first felt what equanimity felt like when I was going through chemotherapy. It will be 15 years ago this spring. And I remember still vividly sitting there. This is in the very early stages of my meditation practice. And so sitting there, breathing, listening, staying anchored in my body. And I remember hearing construction noise outside the window. I'm in New York City. And I could feel all of the honking of the taxis. I could hear the buses outside, just that hustle and bustle New York City energy was happening all around me. And then internally, I was dealing with so much anxiety of like, what's happening in my cells? What's happening to my body right now? I have no idea, no control. And so being with both of that internal and external noise, I remember this felt sense of just sitting there like a mountain, observing it all, not needing to control it, letting it be there, giving it permission to be there, and yet not resenting it. So not getting angry at the noise of the taxis or the construction, even though there were times earlier in my practice where I wanted to be like, F you, shut up. Don't you see I'm meditating here? And internally feeling scared and also angry at my body for developing cancer cells and turning on me. And so I wasn't having that attitude of fear or anger, but instead it was this open, loving, kind of warming sensation, like this neutral, like care, like I care. And I'm just being present enough to be with it because I care. I care that my internal body is going through this. I care about my mental health, my emotional health. I care to be present to the pleasant and unpleasant noise of New York City, and I can just witness it. So this practice of equanimity is immensely important in such a reactive, loud world. I try to embody equanimity as much as I can, and it's hard, right? It is a practice because the reactivity of the world will hijack you. Fear, like walking down the street, being in the subway, interacting with some maybe mentally unstable people, looking at your phone, seeing news headlines, seeing things on social media, getting emails, dealing with interpersonal relationships, dealing with neighbors, right? There's so many things in our world that we have the opportunity to practice this equanimity with. So, for instance, when my husband and I might be in an argument or an intense discussion, I really try, because I'm somebody who can get feisty, who can get really irritable and lash out. I really try to come back to this practice of equanimity, to stay rooted in my body, to stay present with an open heart, open ears, open mind, open eyes, senses, and be able to connect and listen. And of course, it can be really activating when somebody starts to point and poke and prod at you. It can be really challenging to just sit there and hold space. There are many times when I've been poked and prodded and I've gotten activated and lashed out and maybe said some things that I didn't mean to say or didn't want to say, but was saying it from a place of anger or protection. And equanimity is this invitation to come back to neutral, to come back to your center. Like, this is really what being centered in our quote unquote cities is this practice of equanimity. Can we stay rooted and grounded amid the noise, the chaos of life? So within this practice of embodying equanimity, there's a specific teaching that was taught from the Buddha called the Eight Worldly Winds. And these eight worldly winds are about these different extremes of thoughts we can get caught in. These eight different types of winds where our attention can go that can pull us off of our center, that can create more suffering if we attach to them. And these mindsets that we can get attached to, they're really appealing. They're things that I think as humans, we think we all want. And then they're things that we don't want. And so we do whatever we can to kind of hold on to more of the pleasant things we want and try to avoid the things we don't want, right? Avoid that suffering I was talking about earlier. But this practice of the eight worldly winds, when I teach it to my clients, it's so insightful because it's like, oh my God, that's where I get hooked. That's where I'm creating extra internal suffering for myself. And can I note that and give myself permission to set myself free? So these eight worldly winds are gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, success and failure. So you can kind of visualize these eight worldly winds on spectrums. Their dualities, they were kind of reflect their opposites, right? And we want to sometimes go to just praise, and we don't want to go to blame because blame doesn't feel good. Yet we can easily go there. Life can hijack us and we can go there. But we can also so easily get attached to praise that we can hold on to it, and that can also cause us suffering. When we resist or grasp to either one of the spectrums, it creates suffering. It pulls us off of our center. It creates disruption in our life. It creates a sense of imbalance. And I know so many of us want to feel balanced, not in this like idealistic life balance way, but just internally embodied within our skins. We want to feel an emotional balance. So let's talk about these eight worldly winds in more details. I'll give you some more examples. And I really welcome you as we go through these to think about, how are these showing up in your life right now? Where do you notice these winds? How are you getting hooked or attached or avoiding them? And what would it look like to set yourself free, to come back to your center, to find just even 5% more equanimity with what might be happening for you in your life? So gain and loss, right? The spectrum of gain and loss. Our mind, especially in American culture, loves to gain, right? We want more money. We want more things. We want more food. We want that sense of like abundance. And loss, we don't want to deal with, right? Loss typically doesn't feel good. It can maybe evoke some scarcity or insecurity. And so just note, like slowing this down, just note if you win the lottery, even if it's like a scratch lottery and you win like $2, right? There's that sense of dopamine, like, oh my God, I just won $2, right? And if you were to spend $5, $20 on lotto tickets and you didn't win anything, you just lost some money. And there can be that sense of like, ah, that sucks. Even if it's $20 and for you, if that's nothing, like there can still just be that like, ah, that sucks. Right. And so that's even just a really small example of the spectrum of gain of like, oh yeah, dopamine, that feels good, to this loss. So like, I'm without something. I'm not whole and complete anymore. And this can then obviously be, the sensation can be exaggerated depending on what we're talking about. If you have a lot of money invested in the stock market and you're like, wow, my stocks are doing really well. This feels really good, to like, shit, the market just tanked and I lost 10 grand. Like you can feel that, right? And so notice how easy the mind loves to get attached to something. I've worked with clients before who got a new job or really excited about getting a new job. And then I think it was like 4 or 6 months later, they were part of the first layer of layoffs and feeling that loss. And so just kind of in that short amount of time, let's say 6 months, they had this high of like, oh my God, I got this new job I'm excited about. And then this complete sense of loss where the rug felt pulled out underneath them and their life quickly changed again. So this is a spectrum of gain and loss that we can easily get swept away in. Another set of the worldly winds is the spectrum of praise and blame. And oh boy, does this one show up, especially for my ambitious, high achieving clients, where praise is something they typically strive for, to do a good job. And they're looking for a lot of external feedback to tell them that they are on the right track or they are doing well. So when praise is there from a boss, from a manager, from their clients, they feel a high. They feel like they're doing it. They're unstoppable. And then if there's blame, somebody on the team is unhappy or they get feedback from their manager that they messed up on this project or didn't do well in a presentation or dropped the ball, and blame shows up, it like pulls them down. It devastates them. It really knocks them off of their center and can create this swirl of, am I good enough? Am I worthy? Praise can even show up in terms of like social media, like, oh my God, is my photo getting a lot of likes? Am I getting a lot of comments? I have to watch my mind here. Like, am I getting hooked into the numbers and the data? Or maybe there's an absence of feedback and that creates an internal dialogue of blame, of not doing enough, not good enough, that can easily come up for me. And I have to be really conscious of how do I meet that internal voice and that internal story so that I can work with it more skillfully so that it doesn't knock me off my center, that I get to just see it as, interesting. This is data. Interesting. What can I learn from this and how can I move forward? Maybe the spectrum of praise and blame you notice shows up a lot in your life, in more of your interpersonal relationships. Like, do you look to a parent for a lot of praise? Do you notice the mind searches that and the heart wants that? And if it's not there, what happens? Or if it's there, do you really hold on tight to it and notice it creates your identity and your sense of self? The next spectrum is pleasure and pain. And we live in a culture that loves pleasure, and we do not want anything to do with pain, anything that's uncomfortable or unpleasant. But guess what? Without pain, there isn't pleasure. And we need both to experience the spectrum, the beauty of life, right? Love without heartbreak, love without grief. Like, we need it all to be here, to feel, to be human. So just notice, where in your life does your mind search for pleasure. And again, it's not bad that it searches for pleasure. Like life is meant to be enjoyed, but does it get super attached to pleasure that if anything disrupts pleasure and it goes into the spectrum of pain, does that really knock you off of your center? And then again, what's your relationship to pain? Do you avoid it? Do you push it away? Or maybe you're somebody that has been conditioned to create more pain in your life because there's some sort of comfort with pain, or you don't believe you deserve pleasure. And so, where do you then get attached on the spectrum? Like a really small example of this is like when I was getting a massage the other day, I'm lying on the table. I only signed up for an hour. And, an hour goes by so fast, especially if you have gotten a 90-minute massage and know how luxurious that is. I noticed my mind kept being like, oh my God, this feels so good. I never want it to end. Oh, this is going to end so quickly. Like trying to hold on to the pleasure and not recognizing the ever evolving constant of life, that everything changes. Nothing is static, nothing stays the same. So, can I just enjoy the pleasure that's here in this moment and come back to neutral, right? And not be attached? Can I be in neutral, I should say, while I'm enjoying pleasure and knowing that I can still stay in my center and that the pleasure isn't something that defines me, that needs to hijack me? And then think of what happens when we get sick. God, a few months ago, I had a little bit of a cold and it just knocked me out for a few days. And when you're in that moment, you're like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? This feels horrible. Am I going to be sick forever? And we get really kind of attached to this pain and we don't want it to be here. But when we can just embrace, like, this is what is here in this moment, again, that it's temporary, can it allow us to have a healthier relationship to the pain instead of making the pain our identity and like this is going to be the forever thing? Those that might be listening to this who are navigating heartbreak, like when you are dealing with heartbreak, oh my God, does it feel like you'll never love again? And how easily we can get trapped into that story. And so coming back to some equanimity is like, can we feel that sense of balanced mind and heart, that inner calmness as we also experience the pain, knowing that it's temporary and it doesn't need to hijack our sense of self, that we are not the pain. And the last spectrum of these 8 worldly winds is success and failure. And success and failure are so fun to explore here. Success, it feels so good and we love to feel that identity to it. Like, yes, I'm making more money, or I'm making bigger impact, or I am known as an expert in my field, or I'm being called on or thought of for these speaking engagements or opportunities, right? We love this idea of success, especially in a world where there's capacity for more self-actualization, for this sense of growing, achievingness that we love. And then on the other spectrum, there's this aspect of failure that it's like, ooh, I don't want to risk it all. Like, what if I start that company and it fails? Or what if I apply for that job and I don't get it? Right? Failure is something that can really bruise our egos if we're not conscious of it. I know that is part of my growth, and maintaining a growth mindset here is to really see failure as not this end all, you get an F on your forehead, but really that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to keep learning, an opportunity to keep growing. So when we have equanimity with the spectrum of success and failure, can you notice these milestones, the success, these reaches, and can you notice and also be with these setbacks without it rocking who you are as a human and as a person? Can you just notice there are conditions in life that are happening? It's all just information, that it doesn't have to impact your identity. I welcome you to hold these 8 worldly wins in your mind and think about, how can I be this mountain? How can I be more equanimous in my mind, and my heart, and my body as I'm experiencing the winds of life, right? The weather patterns of life, so that they don't blow me off course. So they don't blow me into spirals of self-doubt. They don't blow me into stories, that they don't blow me off of my center, where I'm really grounded into who I am and what I value, and this ability to be rooted and pay attention with kindness, with openness. What I shared at the beginning of this episode, with all of our senses, listening, awake, hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, touching, and noticing this is just life in this moment. So to build this equanimity muscle is, one, to notice these different thought patterns you can get swirled up in, these different 8 worldly winds that you can get caught up in, and bring mindful attention to them, right? Life is all about, that's why I call myself a mindfulness coach, because life is all about bringing mindful awareness to the present moment. When you have awareness of what's present, that's where you actually have power to choose. You then have power to choose of how you want to show up, or how you want to be in relationship to the thing. In order to build more mindfulness, we get to strengthen our mindfulness muscles. And that gets to look like a variety of things. It could be having a more of a formal meditation practice. It could be slowing down throughout your day to offer these little pauses, these mindful moments to check in, to notice, to feel. And then these mindsets you can offer yourself is to remind yourself that everything is temporary. Everything, the pleasant, the unpleasant, it's all impermanent. It might not feel like it in the moment, but it is all going to change at some point, because that is life. Change is constant. So if you can look at life as just a bunch of different weather patterns, yet you are anchored in your body, anchored to the ground as the wind, as the weather is swirling around you, pleasant, unpleasant, praise and blame, success and failure, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. Right? When we can feel all of that swirling around us, can we just notice these different weather points and allow ourselves to not feel internally rocked by it, mentally, emotionally, physically, soulfully? So come back to this image of a mountain if that supports you. I'll link the mountain meditation you can check out. And I really welcome you, as we wind this episode down, to think about, where do you feel these winds right now most strongly in your life? Where do you feel these winds of thoughts most strongly right now in your life? And how might you respond to them with more equanimity? Maybe that's loosening your grip of control when it comes to success or pleasure. Maybe it's gently resting back. You got some blaming feedback, and that's coming back to yourself, reminding yourself that you're whole and complete, that you tried your best, reminding yourself that you get to learn and grow here, seeing life as an opportunity, as a game to play, not something to win. And so just notice, how can you respond to life with some more equanimity? What does that feel like? What does that get to look like? And if you're wanting some more support building these muscles of how to manage the wind that might be swirling around your personal, professional life right now, feel free to reach out for some one-on-one coaching, and we'll support you grounding, building some awareness, getting some perspective and learning some more tools, mental, emotional, physical tools of how to show up to life with more equanimity so that you can have this sense of calm, inner embodied balance that gives you more capacity, more room to choose how you want to respond to life, to remind yourself that you are in charge, that life isn't happening to you, that you get to take charge of life. I also welcome you to join me for this year's virtual intention setting party happening January 25th from wherever you are in the world. And this is a beautiful opportunity to get grounded, to clear the past year, to let go so that you actually have space to connect to yourself without all the stories, the gunk, the noise, and set intentions for 2025 from this clear, grounded, equanimous, beautiful space. Thank you for being here as always. And until next time, stay centered.